Joshua Gayou,
Hello?
thanks for being here today.
Not a problem, sir.
I got your name right, didn't I?
Yes, you did. And points to you, because people usually don't.
Well, I want to thank you for talking with me today. And you are a writer of post-apocalyptic fiction, and you've written a series of
For now.
books. For now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm interested in this story that I'm doing right now, which is post-apocalyptic, but I don't know if I'm going to stay specifically in this genre,
Oh, really?
No. I've got a sci-fi story that I would like to do after this. Maybe a couple of those. I've got at least one fantasy story that's been banging around in my head since I was a kid. So right now I'm kind of just having fun because I'm very new to this, and I think that I'd like to explore a few different genres and just see how it feels to play around in each of them. But right now, post-apocalyptic it resonates quite a bit with me, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. So,
Tell me about when you first realized that you wanted to be a writer. When did you first say, you know what, this is what I want to do?
I'm not convinced that I'm a writer. I kind of wonder about that. I wonder about other writers if they feel like they're a writer. I guess some people do it for a living and that's their primary source of income. And maybe if that was the case for me, then I would feel more natural saying, yes, I'm a writer. Writing right now is something that I do to keep myself sane. I enjoy it. I need to be doing something, I've got my grown-up job that I do as an engineer, and that pays the bills and keeps the roof over the head. And it does pretty good at that. But you can't just be what you're doing at your job, or at least I can't, because I'll just go nuts. So I need some sort of creative outlet that doesn't have to do with avionics or any of that stuff. And writing is something that I've always kind of had an aptitude for. I never had dreams of being a writer or a well-known writer, or fame. Never really thought about that. I like to create things, and for whatever reason, this story that I'm writing right now seems to have some legs. I've tried to start novels for years. I think isn't that like the long running gag? The person is always they're always writing that novel. I'm gonna work on my novel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They've been working on the same novel for a decade or something, right? So since I was 14, I always had this idea that I was going to write a book, and I'd start it, and you get a few pages into it, and then you lose drive or focus because you don't know how to plan a story out, or you don't know how to drive a plot, or you run out of steam. And I really think that at the point of my life that I'm in now, being pretty close to 40, I've got some life experience behind me. So now I think I've got enough wisdom to tell a story that makes sense, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
And then now, having achieved other things that were like long projects, chippers, right? You don't complete it in one day. It's like months and months and months of concerted effort. My professional life and other things. You sit down to write, and you kind of realize, well, this is just a long task like anything else. So you plan it out, and you kind of execute a strategy to get it finished. And it all kind of seems incidental to me, where I'm at right now. It's very bizarre to me that I've got a lot of people reading it now.
But you're having fun doing it. I mean, it's more than a hobby, right? I mean,
well, at what point do you have to stop calling something that you love to do a hobby and start calling it work? I don't know that I'd call it, well, first of all, it is work. No matter how much I love to do it, and I really do, there's always going to be parts of it that you don't enjoy, and that's true for any job. My day job, I love it very much, and I happen to be good at it, but you're never 100% happy 100% of the time. You hit those points that are a slog. And the same thing is true in writing. There's parts of writing where you get to it, and it could be anything. It could be plotting out where the story's going to go beforehand, before you even sit down to write. Or there could be certain characters that are less interesting to you as the author, but they're also critical to the story. So, okay, I gotta do the work on these guys and find something about them to make them interesting. I've got to make them interesting to me, because if they're not interesting to me, they're not going to be interesting to the reader. So sometimes that ends up being work. There are portions of the story that you might not be interested in to tell, because that kind of stuff doesn't interest you. But a story needs to flow. There needs to be action points, and then dialogue points, and then there needs to be world building. There needs to be character dynamics, and there's always going to be one of those things that any writer is not too excited to get into, and so that becomes work, and you just understand that. You say, okay, well, this is the part that's work. It kind of sucks, and I have to slog through it, but I'll get done with it, and then I'll be onto the fun stuff after that. So, I mean, in that sense, it feels like work to me. As far as sales and what the books are doing, the numbers are pretty good. I'm pretty happy with them. I'm not anywhere near what I would have to make in order to replace or eclipse what I make in my professional job. So I mean that if there's anybody at work that's hearing this right now, no, I'm not looking at quitting anytime soon. But the money aspect of it is fun, just because it's nice to have a little extra floating around. And now it's like, if my wife wants some extra thing that we hadn't planned for, we can say, well, yeah, go get that, because here's a little extra dollars that we hadn't planned on to begin with, and those little incidental things are a little bit bigger than we're used to, so that's nice. But it's so hard for me to classify what this is. It feels wrong for me to call it a hobby, because now I've got people depending on me to finish it. Mm-hmm. When I was writing the first book, Commune, that was just me playing around and doing whatever the hell I wanted to, right? Mm-hmm. That was okay. Well, let's start developing this story, and let's see if I've got something with legs. And I guess it kind of turned out that I did. But nobody knew I was writing it. Nobody had any clue. I didn't even tell my wife I was writing it until I think I was 3/4 of the way done, because I was embarrassed to be writing it. That felt embarrassing to someone who, I do a respectable job, and I do these grown-up things all day, and now I'm writing a book. So many people say they're going to write a book. I don't want anybody to know about that, because then they roll their eyes. Oh, there's that guy who's writing a book, right? And I didn't want to tell anybody about it until I knew it was going to be done. It's to me, it's kind of the same thing where you have people that decide, I'm going to lose weight. So the first thing they do is they run around and they tell other friends, I'm on a diet now. And then the friends tell them, oh, good for you, that's fantastic, right? Mm. And then they don't actually lose the weight, because they've gone and they've told their friends they're losing the weight. All of their friends have told them how wonderful that is. They've gotten that positive reinforcement without earning it. You know what I mean? I wanted to have that thing done, or at least close to done, and then maybe I'd start telling people about it. Yeah. And then I thought, maybe a few people read it. And there was kind of a thought in the back of my mind that maybe it gets bigger than I had planned. Maybe more people start reading it. But that's one of those things that you don't really want to think about. One, because it feels grandiose or egotistical, and also, two, because for things like that, I hate to think of myself as superstitious. I'm really not, but for stuff like that, God damn it, I can be. So I tried to focus on just writing the sucker and not worry about any of that other stuff. and that all kind of took care of itself.
That's really interesting. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. There's a bit of a delay. We're going to do that a bit.
Yeah. When you were talking about some of the things you don't like doing as far as the writing process and stuff, I remember asking you after I read the first book if you had served in the military, and I was really surprised when you said you hadn't. Because I was really shocked because you really got it down, and so I was wondering what your research process was for that, and if researching that sort of thing is one of the things you enjoy, or kind of one of the things where, oh God, now I got to look up all this shit that I'm writing about. And
certain aspects of that were a giant pain in the ass. But there were other aspects that I really did enjoy. One of the things I'm doing a lot of things in these books. There's a lot of things that I'm playing with, outside of the main plot arc that the point that I'm trying to get across. But one of the things that I was interested in doing very early on was giving an honest and fair representation of military in this kind of genre or platform, because I've seen it so many times in books and movies and whatever else. And it was always bizarre to me that as soon as society falls apart and everything starts to break down, in so much of the media, the military suddenly become these evil henchmen that are just going off the rails, and they're abusing everybody and being horrible. That doesn't make any sense to me. People who serve in the military, especially today, they've spent a great deal of time in some of the most violent and horrible places of the earth. They're just dangerous places. When you think of a shit hits the fan scenario, well, that's just like Tuesday to a soldier or a Marine. Mm-hmm. They're used to it. So if things like that, if that kind of breakdown happened over here, I think, yes, it would be of psychological impact to them, but I think they would adapt very quickly because they're used to operating in that kind of situation. And then on top of that, these are not brainwashed automaton people. They're our own citizens. They're our kids, our brothers, sisters, daughters. And I just don't see that they would suddenly lose their mind. I think that those would be the ones that you want to get friendly with really quick and be buddy-buddy with, because they'll help keep you safe. So I wanted to explore that in these books. I wanted to show military that were not cartoons. And a big part of that, there's research, and then there's also kind of absorption through osmosis. My father went to Vietnam, and he was both airborne and also a ranger. They kind of shifted him into a ranger group, and he went and did the ranger training as well. Mm-hmm. So he was 82nd Airborne, 101st, and then he was a 50 Deuce Recondo. And I had stories from him growing up. And I heard about how they were treated when they came home from service and like for them. And then also, I've got a lot of good friends that are in the military. You've read the second book.
Correct.
So the CH-46 crew chief, Sergeant Brandt, that's a real person. That's a very good friend of mine. And that story about the flight surgeon, that's a true story. That really happened. So it's good to have friends like that, because I can go and I can bounce ideas off of them. I used to ask Scott about things like that. My character Gibbs, a lot of his behavior, ideas, and mannerisms are based on Scott. His energy, his fidgetiness, his hang-ups about being clean and always sanitizing. Scott's just like this. And it was good because I could ask him, well, let's say you're in this kind of a scenario. And Scott wasn't infantry. He was a crew chief. But I'd ask him, okay, you're in this situation. How do you handle it? Or what makes sense? What makes sense for a Marine to behave? And I think you'll see that too in my books, that I'm very careful about the different branches and how deep I go. The Marines, I feel very safe going deeper into because I have, you know, a Marine at my disposal that I can talk to and really get in it. You know, it's always the real small details that screw you up. The stolen valor assholes can never pull it off, right? Because the minute you start asking them questions, right, like what was your MOS? They can't give you a number. Where did you serve? Where were you stationed? What does the base in Okinawa look like? What does it look like down in Hawaii? And they can't tell you those things. And it's those little details that you've got to get right in the book. Because people who were actually there and did that stuff, they can pick it up really quick, and
Well,
then it's ruined for them because it's so deeply a part of their life.
I was going to say I absolutely agree with that, and one of the especially with post-apocalyptic dystopian military sci-fi things like that. There's a lot of military folks that read that. That's what they're drawn to. That's what I was always
Yeah,
drawn to. And so you're reading along in this book, and they get things wrong, and it just immediately pops you right out of the story.
yeah.
You know,
It reminds you you're reading a book.
exactly. And so when you do read a book and you see these little things, little things that you used to say, little things that used to happen, and that's why I thought, well, oh, this guy's a vet. He obviously served in the military, and
Yeah.
so I really appreciate you getting those little things right, and
I I'm really happy to hear that I did a good job.
yeah.
Um, there's always the chance that somebody pops up and says, hey, you dumbass, you got this wrong, and I'm waiting for that day. And the best I'm going to have, if anybody ever tells me that, is, man, I'm sorry. I wasn't there and I didn't get it right. I should have done better.
Well,
But so far, vets like yourself have told me that they appreciate how I've handled it, and it makes me really glad to hear because a lot of these, not the entire books, but certain things like the character Gibbs, um, and then later on when we get into the third book, Jeffries and some of the other characters, um, that's well, like Gibbs is kind of a love letter to the Marines. I got a soft spot for Marines. I have a soft spot for the Army and the Navy too, because I know people that served in all those branches, and for me, it doesn't matter what you did when you were in the service, right? You could have been a total hard ass, a grunt. You could have just been an admin guy. You could have been, your whole job could have been filling gas tanks. But you know what? You still did more than I did. I'm just a civilian. I never served. I never nutted up. I've got all kinds of accomplishments in this private sector, but there's a whole class of people in this country that to me, they volunteer to go pick up a rifle and then potentially be sent to dangerous parts of the world and be shot at. And that's a level of sacrifice that, I think a lot of people are starting to understand it now. You see it a lot. You see it more. My dad never came home and had anybody tell him, thank you for your service. But he also probably would have turned his nose up at that, too. He's a very unique man. But it's just, we can kind of see it. But I think that understanding what veterans go through and who they are and how they're different from us is an ongoing process. The way most soldiers and Marines come home, they're kind of social dinosaurs compared to
sure.
what media would have you believe is the proper way to behave, right? They're very coarse, very brash people, but I don't I just can't assign a value to these things the way I guess mainstream media or other people do, where they say, oh, this is just categorically bad. The way these people talk, or the way these people talk about the Arabs or the Muslims they've gone to fight. It's bad the way they talk about women. And I think, man, maybe some of this stuff is not comfortable, but this this is an entire different life experience, and it's completely unique. And I don't think that a lot of us are very qualified to comment on it, frankly, unless we've done it.
Yeah, I don't know. You have
There's different levels too. I mean, I'm not talking about like abuse of um, prisoners, right? I mean,
right.
that's horrible. But I'll give you for instance, right? When I was writing my second book with Gibbs, there's a lot of parts in that book where I was thinking, am I going too far? Is Gibbs going to be labeled a misogynist character, and then people are just going to discount what he says or does after that? And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted Gibbs to come across as crass and incredibly vulgar, because that's how Marines are. That's just how they are. But I also wanted it to be clear that there was somebody beneath that persona that was a very thoughtful man. I mean, in a lot of ways, compared to some of the other characters that live on the commune, he's a much more thoughtful man than they are. There's certain people that wouldn't think twice of killing somebody that they thought was a threat, whereas Gibbs is a lot less likely to do that, because he's been to those horrible places, and he knows what kind of toll that takes on a person. So he's more resistant to those things,
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You did an excellent job. I mean, you really did. And
thank you.
I really wanted to reinforce that point, because that's just one of the things that really struck me about both the first and the second book. With that being the case, one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was kind of these stories, kind of like a real life apocalypse, as opposed to like a zombie apocalypse, or kind of like a fantasy apocalypse. And it's nice for me. It's nice to see books that aren't zombie books. And I'm kind of old school in the books that I read. I'm still big on the just a good old nuclear Armageddon is still my favorite way to go. And a lot of EMP stuff, a lot of plague stuff, and one of the things I enjoyed about Commune was you didn't have it as just, because I've always thought it has to be kind of a perfect storm. It can't just be one thing, and so
Exactly.
you went at it from an angle of kind of that perfect storm, and I just wanted to tell you that was one of the things I really enjoyed about the series. But I was wondering if you could talk about your feelings. As far as all that is concerned, the kind of the zombie fantasy end of the world versus the EMP, plague, nukes,
Sure.
Things like that.
Well, I mean, zombies kind of had their renaissance in film, and you better come up with something unique. You can't just do the usual, shambling brain eaters or the fast zombies or the slow zombies or whatever. It was kind of one of the things that occurred to me. My books and the world that I created were kind of a genesis of me consuming other apocalypse stories, right? One that I have to bring up, and I have to keep bringing up, is the Mountain Man series by Keith C. Blackmore. If anybody has not read that book, my God, I truly recommend it. He had such a unique idea when he went to go write those books. He thought, I want to do Robinson Crusoe, but with zombies. And it was an incredibly unique story. It was a very character-driven story. And Blackmore himself, he's more of a horror and fantasy writer. And he just kind of said, "Oh, I can do something with zombies that's fun." And he really did. It was really unique stuff. Put his book aside. What occurred to me was that in so many of the zombie movies, shows, whatever, the zombies always end up being the least fun part, or the least interesting part. And I point to The Walking Dead as the perfect example of that, right? Zombies, by this point, they're just like this nuisance that they show up every once in a while if you need a plot device. the meat of that show, and my interest kind of comes in and comes out on that show. There's aspects of it that I really like, and there's also stuff that just drives me crazy, and I have to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
But the zombies, yeah, zombies. Never mind. It's the activity between the humans and the different factions that really get people talking, right? That's the interesting stuff. And when I was putting my story together, that was what I wanted to get to. That was the story I wanted to tell. I wanted to talk about people living in a world where they weren't being governed by rules anymore, because I think you get very interesting behaviors in that kind of situation. When suddenly all the lights are turned out, you've got all of the toys and the weapons and the relics of this dead world that are just laying around for any asshole to come and pick up. And people coalesce into their own little subgroups, and there's this reversion of tribalism, and they revert into otherism.
Mm-hmm.
Those bastards over there want the same water that I do. They must be evil for some reason. That kind of thing, that was what I wanted to explore. And so what I really needed was a way to break society really fast and just get it the hell out of the way. Because I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to deal with the fall. Stephen King, I thought, did a pretty good job with it in The Stand. Mm-hmm. I liked the first half of his book because he went very deeply into the fall of things and what that process looks like. And there are some things that I thought were pretty good, and then I thought there was other things that he probably didn't address as thoroughly as I would have liked. But the man had a story to tell, so But I knew, okay. What I had to come up with really was I need a greatly reduced population because what I wanted to deal with was a situation where resources are abundant, but only for a while, right? Early in the series, the tension was going to be created by this clock that was always going to be ticking down. Like, you've got enough things to keep you alive right now, but you're running out of them so fast, and you've got to find a way to get back to, those old world survival skills if you want to be somebody who gets to stay. And then the more things run out, the more contentious things were going to be. So the flare, this concept of the flare, I was reading up on coronal mass ejections, and I thought, well, that's a good way to kick things off. If you get a nice big one, and, of course we would recover from something like that if that's all that happened. You'd have about, 6 to 8 months of really awful living, but that would be about it. So what I really did was I basically ripped off Stephen King, right? Because that was how everything came to, right? Because that's how everything came to a head in The Stand when
Mm-hmm.
flu came out and smashed everybody. So I thought, well, that could be the reason why that kicks off. The flare comes, kills all the power systems. We've become so fundamentally dependent on technology, just to do every little thing. When somebody just suddenly throws the switch on that, you figure the safety systems break down, and somewhere somebody's doing something naughty with viruses, and that gets loose. And that's all I need, man. I just need to suggest that, get out, wipe out the population, and then I can get to the fun stuff, which is dealing with how do you survive after that, and what kind of world do you want to build when you have no restraints, no limitations, right?
Right. One of the things I was going to ask you was you're able to write really good, strong female characters. And I'm wondering, was that difficult for you to write really good characters of the opposite sex?
It's a challenge, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of walk a fine line between strength and femininity. as a man, I understand masculine strength very well, but there's a whole layer within feminine strength that's very difficult for me, and I think the average male to comprehend. And I see in other movies or other stories, people tend to display feminine strength as basically a I guess an adoption of male behavior, and I don't think that's 100% correct. I know that some women go that way, but I think there's a lot more to being a woman than just, oh, I can do that better than a man, so I'm going to do that. I think there's so much more complexity than that. With the Amanda character, I got a lot of help from my wife on her, because and she still kind of helps me. She proofs the books to this day. Although Amanda's she's much more cemented in my head now, so I kind of know how she would do things and how she'd behave. But in the beginning, I was very timid writing her, because I didn't want to do anything that felt disingenuous, you know. I didn't want her to feel like, I wanted her to feel like a woman, God damn it, and not something that a man had just clearly dreamt up, right? I wanted her to have somewhere that she had come from that was believable. I wanted her to get to somewhere that made sense. In my books, she has a reputation in the group as being one of the hardest people in the group. You know, mm-hmm. She intimidated a lot of people. And I think that has to do with where she's come from and the things that she's been subjected to in the story and what she's survived. And there's that knife edge that you walk in not turning her into somebody who's just bitter and ugly. And so what I do is I cheat. I put a lot of my wife in her. Not 100%, but there's things that I look for the way my wife behaves, because my wife is one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life. And she looks nothing like what modern feminism would tell you a strong woman looks like. You know, she's very girly in so many ways, but she's stood up to some serious shit. And, she keeps chugging. She does it with poise and grace, and she's a very feminine woman. Despite that strength, there's no confusing her with just some male analog with different plumbing. So I watch her a lot, and I learn from her a lot, and I think I get a good idea of what is right and what isn't right, what doesn't feel correct. And then I have her read through a lot of my stuff. And she finds things sometimes where she says, that isn't correct. They wouldn't do that. So I go back and I touch it up. And then sometimes, her and I kind of disagree. So I have to go a little bit out of what she suggests. And then she tells me I'm an idiot, and we have a drink and move on.
Well, I find that there's a pretty giant separation between what the media tells us people are supposed to be like or act like and how they are like in real life. And so I think you did a really good job at creating these strong female characters and not falling into the trap of making her what the media tries to portray as being a strong female character. And I think I really appreciate that. My wife really appreciates it too, because I let her read some of the book as well. Because I was telling her about this Amanda character, and because my wife is kind of the same way. Well, I'm not going to get into that anyway.
I think foremost, the female character must be competent. And I think that gets kind of overlooked. And I think if we're looking at some other examples of what we have in media today, The Admiral Holdo character in The Last Jedi is, I
Mhm.
think, a perfect example of someone who was intended to be a strong female character but failed because she's incompetent.
Mhm.
Uh, if you look at the structure of the movie, she's a vice admiral, and Poe is a captain. So I have to assume that their naval structure is very similar to our naval structure. So it goes, admiral, then the rear admirals, vice admiral. Right
Mhm.
under that is the captain. Poe is her direct report, and she is not sharing any of the planning with her command staff. That's gross incompetence. And no matter how much more you want to charge politically the discussion about the film, you share your strategy with your command staff. And people who know these things, even if they haven't served, there's some general disconnect. Why didn't she tell them her plans? And so it starts making the audience ask questions about this character. Well, is she an idiot? Is she just vindictive? And her competency comes into question. And we're asking all the wrong questions about her now. And she doesn't come off as strong or brave or anything at all. And it's a goddamn shame, too. I started calling her Admiral Withholdo because she holds all the goddamn information. I think it was just quick, hackneyed, lazy writing combined with, Kathleen Kennedy coming in with her magic hammer and smacking parts of the script. And it's a bummer because there were a lot of aspects of that movie that I think they could have made work pretty well. Political discussion aside, as a story, it falls apart in so many ways.
Are we going to start talking about Star Wars now?
Well,
Because
we can't
because
move
this'll
on
turn
to
into a 3-hour conversation.
we can. Hey, I don't have any plans tonight. We can go as long as you want. But no, it that a bit of what I've done in my stories, and some people would some readers who didn't like my books would disagree, I guess. But they're a refutation of what's kind of becoming the norm in storytelling. I'm trying to go in directions where the average reader would see where my story is going and think, oh God, I know what he's going to do. He's going to do the thing where the person does this because I've seen it in 100 different things. And then I would like to try to go not in a different direction just to surprise people because I feel that's cheap, but I try to go in a realistic direction, but still make it dramatic. I think sometimes I do okay. Other times I probably fuck it up, but nobody's perfect.
Well, let's talk about your audiobooks. You have audiobook versions of book 1 and 2.
Yes,
And I've listened to the first one, and I'm sorry I can't recall the narrator's name. He,
R.C. Brick.
yeah, he did an amazing job. And I had noticed when I was reading through your website that the audiobooks were doing really well.
Yeah, yes, they're doing a lot better than my ebooks and my print books. Absolutely.
Do you think that's simply because it's easier? With my job in the summertime, I'm working all by myself, and all I do is listen to audiobooks and podcasts, and so it makes it really easy to spend 8 hours up in the mountains listening to an audiobook where I can't spend that time reading. So, do you think
I
it's as simple as that?
I think it's a collection of factors. First of all, um, mostly it's due in part to the fact that it's narrated by R.C. Friggin Bray.
Mm-hmm.
He's very popular. He has a massive following, a massive loyal following, and the reason is just because he's so goddamn good at what he does.
Right.
Uh,
I love the story of how you got him. Tell us,
yeah.
tell us about that.
Okay. Okay. So. So this is, I guess, around March-ish of 2017. I had just finished my first book and published it, and I was trying to not get it noticed or break out or hit it big, but just get some more people interested in it. And I was looking at how a lot of other independent writers would market their material. And the whole concept or process of marketing to me is it just sounds like a miserable undertaking. I don't have the staying power nor the patience to do so. I work about 10 hours a day at my normal job, and then I come home. I'd rather spend time with my family instead of dicking around on the computer. So what I usually do is I look at what everybody else is doing, and then I try to find something different. Because there's always that first person who found the new way, and it worked great for them, right? And then everybody else says, oh, what did he do? And they all go and copy that. And then they have varying degrees of success, but I think there's also diminishing returns because, you have one person who runs over it. It's like fishing. You like to fish?
Mm-hmm. I like to catch.
Yeah, catching's good.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. But you see that, right? If you're on a big public fishing boat or up on a pier somewhere, right, and everybody's kind of spread out, right? You got one guy that caught something nice and fat over at the head of the pier. Mm-hmm. And he reels it up, and, everybody else might be having a shit day and not getting any hits. But that one guy brings one up and takes pictures with it and stands there and starts joking with his buddies and have a celebratory beer. And you see a whole collection of jackasses run over to his spot and throw a hook in the water. That's where the fish are. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God, do that. They don't catch anything.
No.
Then down on the other side of the pier, some guy catches a fish down there. And then all those jackasses run over there and they go stand by him and they throw their hooks in the water and they don't catch anything. And I feel like independent publishing and marketing is kind of like that, where somebody gets something that hits and everybody says, oh my God, let's all go do that.
Right.
And I don't want to go do that. So I was looking for something different. And it seemed to me that audiobooks were a good way to distinguish myself from the herd. Everybody's out there. My God, I didn't even realize when I put my book out there and I started kind of swimming in the same waters that everybody else was, and I was like, oh my God, everybody's just they're all with their hands up screaming, look at me, look at me, look at me, and nobody's getting heard. It's just all this noise.
Yeah.
It's tweeting and this and that, and it's like, oh God, I'm never going to get any notice doing this. This ain't going to work. So I was looking into audiobooks because there's a perception with audiobooks, right? Any schmuck can write a book, publish it on Amazon or whatever, and put it out there. And that shows in the quality of the books. You go out there and you pick up a lot of that stuff, and you read a few pages and say, oh my God, yeah, I can't believe it. I'm not going to pay for this. But with an audiobook, there's production involved. There's production value. Somebody's putting money up for this thing. So there's this perception of higher value with an audiobook, because it's not just you that's trying to get that book out there. Somebody else believed in that book too. They read it and said, we think we can make money with this because there's some quality of story here. And I think that bears out. And it certainly has borne out for me. When I put my first book out as an ebook or a print book, at first there was this massive rash of purchases, right? That's all friends and family that know me. And then that peters off very quickly. And then, weeks and weeks and weeks of nothing. No sales, no anything at all, right? Nobody's buying anything. And it's, I'd go to my Amazon reports page and look at it. And instead of any numbers for that week, they just showed me pictures of crickets. And that was all we had.
Oh, jeez.
And I thought, well, damn, okay. And I started thinking, well, do I need to up my marketing game? And I thought, no, I've got this audiobook coming. I got that in my back pocket. Let's just wait and see what happens. And yeah, it really took off. Again, due in large part because R.C. Bray was attached to the damn thing. But that thing climbed number 1 on Audible's post-apocalyptic charts.
Really?
Yeah. And it stayed number 1 for quite a while, too.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch that. I was very shocked because you don't want to assume that's going to happen, but yeah, for post-apocalyptic genre, I think it's dropped a bit. It's kind of petering out now. I think we're down to number 7 now. But it was number 1 for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and then some other book would come and knock it out of the number 1 spot, and that would persist for like 3 days, and then it would drop back down, and my book was back up in number 1 again. That was fun. That was gratifying, and I still haven't seen any kind of success like that in the more traditional, ebook or print market. So I think that. I do think that there's a perception of social acceptance with an audiobook. I have seen, though, that the audiences for both seem to be kind of split. Audiobook listeners don't tend to translate over to traditional sales, and vice versa. That's been my experience so far. Oh, I'm sorry. You asked me to talk about getting R.C. Braid to do the book. Yeah, that's tequila talking, bro. I will run my mouth. All right, let me clue you. So I was looking into audiobooks. It happened that at that time, and I had been a fan of R.C. Braid's for a while. You hear so many people say this about him. When they're looking for a new audiobook to check out, they don't go look for titles or authors. They go look for R.C. Braid. I want to see what books he's narrating and go get those. Because he also tends to be careful about the books he selects too. He has a good nose for what's good and what's going to be good. And he protects his brand by staying away from some of the other, He won't take a payday just because he can get some money. So he's doing an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. And he posted about that and said, I'm going to do this Ask Me Anything. Would you guys be interested in checking that out? I'm at the time, I'm just a fan. He doesn't know me or anything. I said, hey, I want to... So he does it that night, and my question was, it had to do with this. Hey, buddy, thanks for taking the time to do this. I've got a book, and I would like to get into the audiobook game, but I don't have the disposable income to just throw at it, because they can take as much as $10,000 to produce, depending on what the narrators get for recorded hour, right? If you're a good narrator, you can make from $500 to $1,000 per recorded hour if it's money up front. And, my first book, Commune, that ended up being a 9-hour, 45-minute book. So that's some good cash coming out of it. I'm just, for something that's a hobby, I'm not going to throw that kind of money at it if I can't insure my investment, right? I don't know if anybody's going to buy this thing. So I said, what are other ways to get into this? And he said, man, that's a great question. This is not the right forum for that. That's going to take too long to answer. So, he said, here's my email address. Email me offline, and we'll talk about it, and we'll see. I'll tell you what the industry actually looks like to somebody who works in it. Thank you very much. That's very awesome of you. So I did. I left the AMA, went and wrote him an email, and basically the same question, and left it at that. And he started talking about the industry, and I learned a lot from him just that evening in that email exchange. He said what things were like, what it was like to get into it. How a lot of different production houses like to operate. But unbeknownst to me, at the same time, while he was doing this, he went out and bought my book, my first copy. He got the ebook. And he read, I think it was the first chapter or maybe the first 2 chapters that night. So the next day when I went into work, I had an email waiting for me where he said, I've purchased your book. I've read a couple of chapters. I'm doing your series. You have no say in the matter. We're going to produce this book. And I said, holy shit. I said, well, I haven't written the other books, sir. You're signing up for the whole thing. And he said, yeah, I want to do these books. He said, I like this so much. And Bob is he's very, very sarcastic, very witty. So he's kind of talking the book up and saying what he liked about it, and then at the same time he says, but you got 300 pages to fuck it up. So he's very very, very sarcastic, but that has kind of blossomed into a really good working relationship. And today now I consider him a buddy. We email pretty frequently, and we work very closely on the production of these books too, because we produce through his own company, Blue Heron Audio. So he's got his own private sound booth in his house where he's recording all this stuff. and he does a few chapters every day, and then he'll send them off to me for proofing because we don't have like a proofing or
Mm-hmm.
quality department. So he sends them off to me, and then excuse me, I'll listen to them and proof them and compare them to the manuscript, and I'll do that. Like I'll get home from work, or I might download a chapter at work and listen to one chapter during lunch before I get back into the daily grind, and we bang them out like that, and it's been really fun working with him.
Now the second book, excuse me, is supposed to, or the second audiobook is supposed to be out February this month, correct?
Yeah, it's either going to be at the end of this month or at the early point of March. We're producing it right now.
Okay. Okay.
We're about halfway through recording it. He's recorded and corrected up to chapter 15, and I think the second book is like a 30 chapter book. So the work was slowed down a little because he had some computer crap out issues. He had to order some new gear and set his rig up again. He's gotten all that shit together again, and we're kind of humming now. So I expect it to be out pretty soon.
I also noticed that your the third book is available for pre-order right now. I've actually obviously pre-ordered it.
Well, thank you.
Oh well, of course. What? But I don't recall when that's coming out. I don't remember what it said.
The ebook. So things have kind of gotten screwed up on Amazon. I'm never going to do a pre-order again. That is just such a pain. I'm just going to put the book out.
Oh,
Screw
really?
that. Oh yeah, Jesus, what a pain, man. So what I wanted was for the books to be available when the audiobook dropped, the second audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, a pre-order date of March 1st. So the ebook for Commune 3 is going to release on March 1st. What a lot of people don't know is that the print copy is already available. You can get that right now.
Of the third one?
When I set up, yeah. When I set the damn thing up and put it up there, their publishing tools in Amazon KDP or whatever it is. It's not terribly straightforward. Well, either that or I'm just an obtuse moron. But I thought when I was putting the print book up that the date I was trying to set a publishing date for it, and I thought it was just going to take my ebook date, the launch date for March 1st. Oh, good. Everything's going to come out on the same day. The following day, hey, your print book's available. You can go get it now. It's like, I didn't select that at all. And I go back and I try to play with the dates, and it doesn't look like I can move the date around or change it. And at that point, I say, screw it. It's up already. I don't care. Somebody's already bought a copy. So, yeah, pre-ordering is just lame. There's no reason to do it outside of the fact that I wanted it to come out at a specific time in tandem with the audiobook. I'm not going to bother doing that anymore. When the book is ready, I'm just going to put it out and let people get it. This is lame.
Well, okay. well, because I actually just pre-ordered it.
What you need to understand is that there's no great genius behind any of this stuff. It's just some ass with a laptop producing books.
Oh, man. Hey, do you hear from your readers very often?
A lot more now, yeah.
Really?
I do, yeah. It's
is that a good thing?
Yeah, it is. It's strange. It's really weird for me. I've gone from a position of hey, is anybody out there to God damn, there's a lot of people out there. And all of my readers that take the time to reach out and contact me have been just incredible. They've been really great, and I don't want to sound like one of these these famous media assholes who's like, oh, I love all the fans. I don't think of them as fans. I think of them as readers. And if they come in, I tend to interact with them a lot more on my Facebook page. Just because I'm a dinosaur and I understand how that works better. But the interaction on Facebook also seems to be more of more quality and meaningful than what I've seen on Twitter. Twitter is very fire and forget,
Yes.
Whereas Facebook feels like there's a lot there's more meaningful interaction. And the people who do reach out, I've gotten like one or two emails from fans, readers who said, I really like what you're doing with the story, and I've chatted with them back and forth. But for the most part, it happened on Facebook, and a lot of them are very intelligent, thoughtful people that I talk to them, and I'm interested in what they have to say, and I watch for things because they have really unique insights on things. So I like to hear that. I was reading a lot of my book reviews for a while, just because that was really fun. That's also a very strange experience if you're just starting out and suddenly you get a book that takes off pretty well, because at first it's like you get like one review on Amazon or something, and it's like a day to celebrate. Oh my God, somebody read it and they liked it and they said something about it. My God. And there's a ton of ratings for the first book on Audible now, and thankfully it's been resoundingly positive. There's been some people that hate it.
Oh, there always is.
Oh yeah, but that was also fun for me because that was when I knew that the book was actually really getting some traction. You get a bunch of people that say, "Oh, I love it, I love it, I love it." It's like, okay, how many people do I know? I recognize you. I recognize you. You're not going to tell me if this is crap. But there's people, and most of the people that have had negative things to say about the book, they got a point. I like hearing what they have to say. Some of them sound like I've really ruined their day, like I've pissed them off. But I can't help that. But I've enjoyed the criticisms as much as the positive comments, because if you look at the criticisms correctly, you can turn that into a positive. You can look at ways to improve yourself based on that. There's only been one poor review that I ever took issue with and actually went out of my way to respond to. And that was somebody who had said that, well, first of all, they gave me a high review for my first book. Came out and they said, "Oh man, there's a lot of great stuff in here." And then they came back after that a few days later and knocked it down to a very poor review. And they added on to it and said, "Well, except for the fact that this book is so short, and I got the audiobook, and you have to pay a lot of money for an audiobook. And I feel like because this book is a series, this is just such an obvious cash grab on the part of the author. It was just a way for him to drive up the price on his readers." And I mean that I took issue with that just because it's categorically untrue. When you do a royalty share deal with the Audio Connection Exchange, ACX, which is what Bob and I go through to put our work up on Audible, as the producer or the author, you don't set the price. Audible sets the price. They tell you what the book is going to be priced, and I have no idea how they select that price either. I've tried to kind of look at other books of comparable length and figure it out, but they've got some kind of secret sauce algorithm that I don't know about.
Yeah.
But they set those values. So I mean, like, I had nothing to do with that. And I wrote the first book the length that I thought it ought to be. The first book's a very simple story. There's not a lot of people in it. All I had to do was get them up to Jackson and done, and then we can start focusing on that other stuff. So I took issue with that. Anything else that people gripe about? Yeah, and you said this too when you discussed the first book with me. You said, "Boy, there's a lot of gun stuff in there." And
I wasn't going to bring it up, but
No. Let's talk about it. I agree. And you know what's so funny about that is that the things that some people take issue with and say, "Oh my God, this ruined the book for me," those are the exact same things that other people come back and say, "Man, I really appreciated that you put that stuff in there and that you got it right." And so, on one hand, you try to make the best quality story that you can to please as many people as you can.
Right.
But on the other, if you try to keep everybody happy, you're just going to fuck it all up. It's going to be a mess.
Well, sure. Yeah.
And so the best you can do is try to tell the story the best way you can. Like all the gun stuff, I agree that was clumsy in the first book. what I was trying to do I was trying to address a topic for non-gun people.
Right.
I wanted that to be clear. When you're living in a world like that, that's the kind of stuff that you have to start thinking about. But I did it in a massive dialogue dump. And I probably could have done that with more finesse and spread it out throughout the story. But it's also the first book I ever wrote. So, yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
So, I take that as a learning experience, and I like to think that the second book improves on that. There's a little bit of it in the second book, but I think it's handled more artfully. And then in the third book, we're on to different things by that point. The intent of the series is that each book has a unique feel to it. The first book must feel very claustrophobic and small because you have a small group of people that find themselves adrift in this big, wide open world. And then in the second book, it's opened up a little bit more, and there's this question of group dynamics and resources running out very quickly, and how do you deal with that? And then the third book, we get into factions, different factions of people in different groups competing for the same needs.
Well, I know one of the, and I know that was one of the things that I mentioned was a lot of the gun stuff. And
you're right.
But
right.
But then when we had talked about it before, I think you did a really good job in the sense that you have these these people that have never even seen a gun in real life, and so I think you did a really good job at showing. How do I want to say it? That I'm gonna have to fucking edit the shit out of this thing.
Don't worry about it.
All my dead air. Showing how someone who is not familiar at all with this stuff, having to basically learn how to use them, and I think you did a really good job with that when you did that, and but yeah, and then I noticed in the second book there wasn't as much, and it certainly didn't ruin the first book for me at all. The only thing that'll ruin a book for me is lazy. I don't know if it's lazy writing or lazy editing. Where I don't know if sometimes writers just it's the first draft and they throw it on Amazon and it's just jam packed full of typos and syntax, just every error you can possibly think of. And that's the only time where, and the unfortunate thing is that sometimes it's a really kick-ass story, but I just can't read it. It's essentially impossible to read.
It only takes one thing to ruin a story for someone, and it just depends on the person, It's like some people, man, I've seen some reviews of people that didn't like the story, the first story. And they said, man, it just feels like this guy's a gun guy. And I mean, I'm not. I know guys that are gun guys, and I don't consider myself a big gun guy. I have firearms. I like to go out shooting, but there's guys. It seems like they've got a new AR every month.
Right.
And I don't really get the money for that stuff. But for me, it was more a question of driving home this idea that. When you're in this situation, this is the kind of stuff you need to worry about. And then the other thing that I was kind of having fun with in the first book was you had the characters like Billy and Jake and so forth making a lot of assumptions about something that they actually hadn't really had any experience with. Mm-hmm. There's a whole discussion about, the 5.56 round is just a 22.
Mm-hmm. I love that part, that interaction between the whole shotgun versus AR thing. That was awesome. Really liked it.
And then they go to work with the thing, and they find out that within a certain distance, a 5.56 round does some pretty horrific things. Mm-hmm. And Billy, who just in the previous scene or chapter had taken such an authoritative tone about this round and spoke from such a position of knowledge. Now he's looking at this situation in reality and practice, and saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to rethink everything because I clearly was missing a few points."
Mm-hmm.
And you see that a lot. You see that online when people get into these caliber debates and 9 millimeter versus 45 and all that. It's
Oh,
like,
God.
yeah, and it's like, you know what, man? Have you ever carried one of these things around for a living?
Mm-hmm.
No. Well, then why do I want to listen to you? The whole shotgun thing. I mean, that's my dad, and my dad. He's very negative on the 5.56 round. He's not a fan at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy lugged an M60 around in Vietnam, and like one of his favorite things to shoot out of the M60 were those 7.62 piggyback rounds.
Mm-hmm.
I guess not a lot of guys back then were getting their hands on, but he could get his hands on it.
Mm-hmm.
But if he was in the city going building to building, it was he had to have a shotgun. He just, that was the right tool for the job as far as he was concerned. And there's a lot of guys now today that are, no, you 5.56, 5.56. That's cool, man. I'm sure it's great, but my dad did it for a living with a shotgun, and he came back alive, so he probably knows what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I always think, hey, you know what? Get about 100 yards out there, get shot with one, and you tell me how ineffective it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But whatever. I used to be pretty big in the firearms community on the internet, and probably about 5 years ago, I completely left it because it was just nothing but full of, mall ninjas and internet commandos, and the caliber debates, and that's stupid. This is the best. What I have is the best. What you have is dumb. And it was ridiculous. It was immature. It was ignorant. And
the internet that everything turns into such a toxic fight all the time.
I know.
What the hell's wrong with us anymore?
I know. And and I try my best, to try to stay positive, and I'm mostly on Twitter, and so, but I tell you, it's a fight, man, every day, just not to just flame out and just
rise above, man. Rise above.
I know. I try, but well, let's let folks know where to find you.
So let me see. I've got my main website is joshuagayou.wordpress.com. I think I've got that right. I don't know for sure, but you can find me out there just by searching for Joshua Gayou, or if you look for the Commune book series. You can find me on Audible. If you search for R.C. Bray, you can find my books under his name. If you care enough to look into the books that I'm writing, I'm sure you'll run into me.
All right. Well, I'm going to be writing up a little blog post, and I'm going to go ahead and throw all the links to all the places where folks can find you in there. So,
okay.
All right, Joshua. I think we're going to wrap this up.
All right, my man.
Thanks again for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
I had a lot of fun. I hope we can do this again sometime, man.
Yeah, I think so. All right, all you wanderers out there. Till next time, take cover, take care. And we're done.